We're going to read about the writing on the wall, which a lot of you probably have heard that phrase, but may not know that the phrase comes from uh, Daniel chapter 5, the writing on the wall. And so we have also we have a new king here, whose name is Belshazzar, and not to be confused with the name given to Daniel, which was Belshazzar. Um, Let me speak a little bit about this king and the succession of kings after Nebuchadnezzar died. So Belshazzar, let me see here. So when we come to Daniel 5 here, we notice that Nebuchadnezzar is no longer the king of Babylon. And so how does it pass from Nebuchadnezzar to Belshazzar? And so we have to go and look through some of the ancient records. And so we have an ancient historian whose name is Berosus, and he gives us the following order of events. That Nebuchadnezzar died after a 43-year reign. And so he reigned from BC 605 to 562. And then his son took over, and his name, he was known as Evil Merodach or Merodach. And his story can be found in Second Kings and in Jeremiah. And then he only ruled for 2 years, and he was assassinated by his brother-in-law, whose name was Neri Glassar. And because his rule was arbitrary and licentious, so Neri Glassar, he's mentioned in Jeremiah by the name, I'm not even going to try to go for this one, but it's Nergal-Sharezer. And yeah, we'll name the boy Nergal-Sharezer. So so he can be found in Jeremiah 39, and he ruled for only 4 years, but he died of a natural death. And then his son, another big name here, his name was Laboro Sorarchid. And he's the only a child when he started his reign, and he had diminished mental health or mental capacity, and he ruled for only 9 months, and he was beaten to death by a gang of conspirators. So these conspirators, they appointed, excuse me, a guy by the name of Nabonidus, who was one of their gang. They appointed him to be king over Babylon, and he ruled just a short time until Cyrus, the Persian, he conquered Babylon. So this guy, Belshazzar, is a son, which we'll see here in a minute, of Nabonidus. And so it's a possibility that Nabonidus his eldest son was Belshazzar. So there's no other mention of Belshazzar. He's the eldest son of Nabonidus. And there is what they call the Nabonidus cylinder, which was a clay, I don't know, so it's a cylinder. If I had a picture of it, I'd show you, but it's made out of clay, and it had writing on it, and it talks about this Belshazzar, which it speaks of his eldest son, Belshazzar. So according to Babylonian records, Belshazzar became co-regent in the 3rd year of Nabonidus' reign of 553, and continued in that capacity till the fall of Babylon in 539. So it's most likely that at the time Nabonidus had gone out to fight the Medo-Persian army, and that he had already been captured. And so that's why his son was in his place. And it's interesting because now these armies surround Babylon and are looking for a way to get in the strongly defended city. So let's read Daniel chapter 5, verses 1 through 4, and we'll learn a little bit about the story here. So, verse 1 says, Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. And while he tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple, which had been in Jerusalem, and that the king and his lords and his wives, his concubines, might drink from them. And then they brought the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem. And the king and his lords and his wives and his concubines drank from them. And they drank wine and praised the gods of gold, silver, and bronze, and iron, wood, and stone. So here we see this guy Belshazzar, he's made this great feast for 1,000 of his lords. Belshazzar was not afraid. So the city's surrounded, is being sieged, and so he's not afraid of the siege that's surrounding the city. And he's confident because of Babylon's impressive defenses and his vast supplies. So we have calculations that set the dimensions of the ancient city of Babylon. The outer walls were 17 miles long, and these walls were 22 feet thick, 90 feet high. And the outer walls also had guard towers, another 100 feet high. The city gates were made of bronze, and it had a system of inner and outer walls and moats that made the city very secure. So it says his father Nebuchadnezzar, and so Nebuchadnezzar is not really a direct father of Belshazzar. He's either the grandfather through his mother's side, or he was Belshazzar's father in the sense of having previously occupied the throne of that Belshazzar now sat on. So either usage of the term father was accepted in the ancient times. So it says they drank wine and they praised the gods of gold and silver and bronze and iron, wood and stone. So the scene of partying while a hostile army surrounded the city reminds us of the spirit of our present age. Many today have the idea that the best response to the seeming danger of times is to forget about it and escape into the pursuit of pleasure. Boy, I know this of myself. When I was going through hard times, it was easier to escape. It's interesting also that they praise the gods of gold, silver, and bronze, and so on and so forth. And it's kind of in the same sense we do that today. You think of Sunday football, and everyone's getting drunk and praising their favorite player, their favorite team, or maybe their favorite car, Porsche, Ferrari, whatever. So, we still see that going on today. In Ephesians 5:18, Paul calls drunkenness dissipation. So drunkenness is a waste of resources, which that should be submitted to the Lord. Dissipation is basically debauchery. So Paul says in Ephesians 5:18 says, "Do not get drunk with wine, for that is dissipation." And so debauchery, decadence. So it says they brought the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem. And so Belshazzar was foolish enough not only to lose all semblance of self-control at his party, but also to openly mock God. And so he committed the sin of sacrilege, and something few people are concerned with today. They're gathering the vessels from the Jewish temples to serve the purpose of reminding the partiers of a previous victory. We have Belshazzar hoped it would boost morale, possibly. So this blasphemy is a high degree, I'm sorry, and therefore presently will be punished by God. So in Babylon, a large court, so they're in this court. It's 56, a large court, 56 by 170 feet, has been unearthed and decorated with Greek columns. So this is probably where the feast took place. So moving on to verse 5, we see this God's going to write this message on a wall. So it says, in the same hour, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. So we see a finger of a man's hand appeared, and God can and sometimes does communicate to man in unexpected ways and even shocking ways. And here a hand mysteriously appeared on the and wrote on a wall. The king saw the part of the hand that wrote. So this, of course, is where we get the proverbial phrase, the writing on the wall. It's interesting to note that other times that God wrote with his finger, the Ten Commandments were written by God on stone. And then there was another time in the New Testament where Jesus wrote in the sand with his finger, or in the dirt with his finger, in the part of the story of the woman who was caught in adultery. So nobody knows what he wrote, but it's interesting as we move on here that we may, at least in my mind, think that what was written to Belshazzar may have been the same thing that was written to the, or something similar to the Jewish leaders at that time. So moving on, we see his reaction to the message and his call for someone to interpret this. So verse 6 through 9 says, "Then the king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened, and his knees knocked against each other. And the king cried out aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spoke, saying to the wise men of Babylon, 'Whoever reads this writing and tells me the interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck.'" So remember, purple is, very, wealthy. So he shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Now all the king's wise men came, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king its interpretation. And then King Belshazzar was greatly troubled. His countenance was changed, and his lords were astonished. So the joints of his hips were loosed and his knees knocked. It kind of reminds me of a cartoon when you see like the old Looney Tunes cartoons or something. Daniel's vivid description shows us that Belshazzar was terrified, and his carefree partying was so shallow that it turned from merry to terrified in just a moment. And this shows that his conscience was active beneath his energetic partying. And so after all, Belshazzar could not understand the writing. Why should it trouble him so? It troubled him because his own conscience testified against him. So it says, "Whoever reads the writing and tells me its interpretation." So the king, the difficulty was not to give the dictionary definition of the terms, but to see what the significance they had for him. He says that he shall make this, whoever reads it, a third ruler in the kingdom. So archaeologists have discovered why Belshazzar offered the interpreter of the dream a third place in the kingdom. And the real king was his father Nabonidus, and his son Belshazzar ruled as second in the kingdom. So Belshazzar, he can't give away the second place of the kingdom, because he was in the second place at that time. So the best he had to offer was third place. Um, so they can't interpret this dream or the writing, or the dream, I'm sorry, the writing, or make known to its interpretation. So uh, Daniel, he came in to interpret these words, and it does not seem so hard to figure out. It may be that God deliberately put a veil over the minds of these men so Daniel would be called out. Um, but we've seen in the past that they weren't so easily able to interpret dreams, or the meaning of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. So here we are, kind of in the same situation again. So Daniel, he's recommended as an interpreter of the message. So moving on to verse 10, the queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came to the banquet hall. The queen spoke, saying, "O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy God. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, the king, made him chief of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Inasmuch as an excellent spirit, knowledge, understanding, interpreting dreams, solving riddles, and explaining enigmas were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will give the interpretation." So this queen, she's a queen mother. It's hard to identify with certainty, but probably it's Belshazzar's mother, who possibly is the daughter of Nebuchadnezzar. We don't know for sure, but so she says, "There's this man in your kingdom." When the wise men were called to explain the writing on the wall, Daniel apparently was not called at that time, and it seems that Daniel. So we're going on in a few years here, so it seems like he may be semi-retired, but he's still holding a government office. Remember that Nebuchadnezzar had promoted him highly, and so over and over again he was promoted. So he's still holding a government office, but may not be a main figure in the administration any longer. So whom the king named Belteshazzar. So Daniel, his name given to him when he was brought to Babylon, they changed his name and gave him the name Belteshazzar. So the queen's referring to Daniel by his Jewish name, and showing respect for his faith and his background. So now we have Belshazzar ask Daniel to interpret this message. So verse 13 says, "Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, 'Are you that Daniel who is one of the captives from Judah, whom my father the king brought from Judah? I have heard of you, that the Spirit of God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known to me its interpretation. But they could not give the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of you that you can give interpretations and explain enigmas. Now, if you can, read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, that you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be third ruler in the kingdom.' So Daniel's brought before the king, and so when everything seems great and when the partying is going nonstop, God and his servants are mocked, they're neglected, or they're hidden away. But when the hand of heaven wrote a sobering message, panic-stricken worldlings cried out for the one who had the Spirit of God. So he says, I have heard of you. And since Belshazzar didn't think to call Daniel himself, it seems that his remembrance of Daniel was either long ago or just now by this queen. So what's the message? So an introduction to Daniel describes Belshazzar's sinful pride. So we have verse 17 says, then Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. And whomever he wished, he executed, and whomever he wished, he kept alive. And whomever he wished, he set up, and whomever he wished, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And then he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. And they fed him with grass like an oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven. Till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men and appoints over it whomever he chooses. But you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart. And although you knew all this, and you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven. And they have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. So Daniel says, let your gifts be for yourself. We remember that Daniel was troubled when he had to give Nebuchadnezzar bad news in the last chapter. So this isn't the case here. Daniel is not impressed with this successor of Nebuchadnezzar. It says, you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. So Daniel was so harsh because Belshazzar should have known better. And even he was not raised in a godly home. Romans 1 reminds us that all men know of God through creation. So Belshazzar should have known even more through God's dealings with him and through Daniel. We are all responsible to honor God according to what revelation we have. God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. So it would be easy for Belshazzar to think that he did everything, or that he never did anything against God of Israel, at least nothing too bad. Yet at the very least, he had not glorified the true God, and every creature is obligated to give glory to their creator. The breath of the creature should praise the creator, but Belshazzar blasphemed God with his breath. And so the ways of the creature should glorify the creator, but Belshazzar used his ways to mock and offend God. And every creature owes something to the creator. We have Daniel's going to tell Belshazzar that God's judgment is at the door. So moving on to verse 24. Then the fingers of the hand were sent from him and this writing was written, and this is the inscription that was written. Many, many tekel of Sarsin. Many, many tekel of Sarsin. This is the interpretation of each word. God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. That's many. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and have found wanting. Paris, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. So we have many tekel of I can't even pronounce it, of Sarsin. This is the interpretation of each word. It should be observed that each word stands for a short sentence. Mene signifies numeration. Tekel is weighing. Paris is division. And so God had Belshazzar's number and it fell short. God weighed Belshazzar and it came up light, or he came up light. And God would therefore divide Belshazzar's kingdom and give it to the Medes and the Persians. So it says he's weighed in the balances and found wanting. So a mighty army and brilliant tactics overcame the Babylonian Empire, yet it still fell from within. The armies of the Medes and the Persians could only conquer because Belshazzar and his kingdom were found lacking in spiritual and moral values. Kind of like the USA, I think we're lacking in a lot of morality right now. The kingdom is given to the Persian. Excuse me. It's given to the Medes and the Persians. And the ancient Greek historian Herodotus relates that the Persian king Cyrus conquered Babylon by diverting the flow of the Euphrates into a nearby swamp. So this lowered the level of the river, so his troops marched through the water and under the river gates. They still would have not been able to enter had not the bronze gates of the inner walls been left unlocked. And this was exactly what God had predicted in Isaiah and in Jeremiah, that God opened the gates of the city of Babylon for Cyrus and put the writing 200 years before it happened. Cyrus was prophesied in both those books, Isaiah and Jeremiah. So in October of 539 BC, Cyrus advanced into the lower Mesopotamia, leaving Babylon till last. And he conquered and occupied the surrounding territories. Seeing which way the wind was blowing, Nabonidus of Babylon deserted his city, leaving it in the charge of his son Belshazzar. So here it says, this is another historical account saying that he had left the city. Another account that I said earlier said that he had been captured in war. So whichever, we don't know. The taking of Babylon was a bloodless and effortless, as Daniel 5 here implies. And so the fall of Mystery Babylon, which is coming, will be like the fall of the real Babylon. It will be sudden, it'll be sure, and in the midst of her worst blasphemies. Empires do not stand by human might, man-made machines and missiles. There is not a wall high enough nor thick enough to prevent a nation from falling when God pronounces the nation's doom. It's a quote from Strauss. So Daniel here we see is promoted, sort of. So verse 29, then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a chain of gold around his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. So they clothed him with purple, and so though his words were harsh, Daniel's quickly rewarded. And either Belshazzar knew that Daniel was right and bravely tried to do the best under the inevitable, or he disbelieved the whole thing and promoted Daniel in a display of big-hearted fun, which I doubt. But he should be the third ruler. So Daniel held this post for just a few hours. And this shows how temporary the awards and the accolades of this world are. In the kingdom that succeeded Belshazzar, Daniel is also promoted. But that was due to God and not Belshazzar. So we see Daniel through all these different kings and kingdoms is promoted. We see the death of Belshazzar and the rise of Darius the Mede, verse 30 through 31. And so that very night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So the word is fulfilled, just as Daniel said. God's word is always reliable and true. Darius the Mede receives the kingdom. Darius is like a sub-king under Cyrus, and he's referred to in secular history as Gubaru. So that is another quick run through of a chapter and a very interesting story. And so